Have you ever noticed how often men silently measure themselves against an invisible clock? Maybe it's the locker room jokes, the endless bravado on social media, or the quiet comparisons in your own mind. Somewhere along the way, the idea took root that sex has to last a certain amount of time, that performance is measured in minutes, and that if you fall short of some magic number, you've failed. I'm Dr. Maya Kapoor, and today I want to take you into a study that cut through the myths and the noise, not with opinions or fantasies, but with cold stopwatch-timed data from over 500 couples across the world. And what it revealed might surprise you, not just about how long sex actually lasts, but about what really matters when it comes to intimacy, connection, and confidence as a man. First, let's talk about why this even matters. In today's culture, movies, adult content, and even casual conversations build up an unrealistic script of what sex should look like. You've probably heard numbers tossed around or advice whispered like it's fact, and each time that pressure digs a little deeper into your confidence. But here's the truth. Most men are already doing fine. The problem isn't their stamina. It's the comparison they've been making against a fantasy that doesn't exist. So let's set aside the myths and look at what the science says. In medicine, we have a very specific way of measuring this. It's called IELT, intravaginal ejaculation latency time, which simply means the number of minutes from penetration to ejaculation. In surveys, men often guess that the ideal duration is around 16 minutes, and they think the typical guy probably lasts 9. But when researchers asked real couples to measure this with stopwatches, the average came out to 5.7 minutes. Yes, under 6 minutes. Some men lasted only a few seconds, while others went nearly an hour, but across the entire group, the average was the same, about 5.7 minutes. And this varied by country. Turkey averaged 4.4 minutes, while the United Kingdom topped the list at nearly 10. So, what does this mean for you? If you've ever felt anxious about whether you're lasting long enough, now you have the real numbers. And if you're anywhere near that average, you're right where most men are. What's fascinating, though, is how different this is from what women say they prefer. In a large survey of 4,000 women, the average answer was about 25 minutes of penetrative sex. But here's where context matters. Because intimacy isn't measured by a clock. Preferences shift with age, mood, arousal, and emotional connection. Some couples thrive with quick encounters, others with longer sessions. There isn't a single right number, and that brings me to the most important point. Satisfaction isn't about minutes, it's about connection. The problem comes when men chase a number instead of focusing on their partner's needs or their own experience. If you're struggling with finishing too quickly or finding it difficult to finish at all, those are real issues, and they are treatable. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes psychological, often a mix of both. A urologist can help you figure that out. And if anxiety or relationship tension is part of the story, working with a certified sex therapist can be life-changing. But I want you to hold on to this. There is no stopwatch standard for good sex. The only measure that matters is whether you and your partner leave the experience feeling satisfied, connected, and cared for. That might be 5 minutes, 15, or 50. It doesn't matter. What matters is presence. Because when you stop counting, you start feeling. When you let go of the pressure, you make space for intimacy to deepen. So the next time you find yourself wondering if you're lasting long enough, remember this truth. The average is far shorter than you've been led to believe, and chasing someone else's number will never bring you confidence. Real confidence comes from listening to your partner, to your body, and to the quiet truth that satisfaction is not measured in minutes, but in meaning. Now let's step a little deeper into why this myth of lasting forever has become such a heavy burden for men. From the moment most boys first become curious about sex, the world begins planting ideas in their minds. Maybe it was the jokes in the locker room, the hushed whispers passed around at school, or the first glimpse of an adult film when they were far too young to understand what they were seeing. Those moments leave deep impressions. The actors on screen weren't chosen by chance. They were selected, filmed, and often edited to appear larger than life. And yet, without knowing it, many young men took those images as the standard of what intimacy should look like. Years later, even as husbands, fathers, and grandfathers, the ghost of those comparisons still lingers. I've had men in their 60s and 70s sit across from me with the same quiet confession, "Dr. Kapoor, I just don't last as long as I think I should." When I ask where that expectation comes from, they often can't say. It's just something they've carried for decades, an invisible stopwatch ticking in the back of their minds. One man, George, told me he avoided initiating intimacy with his wife of 40 years because he believed 9 or 10 minutes wasn't enough. When I showed him the data, that the global average is under 6 minutes, he sat in stunned silence. "All this time," he whispered, "I thought I was failing." His story isn't unusual, it's heartbreakingly common. In medicine, we call this IELT, the number of minutes from penetration to ejaculation. Surveys show that men believe the ideal is around 16 minutes. They guess the typical man probably lasts about 9. But the stopwatch study of over 500 couples revealed the truth. The average was just 5.7 minutes, not 15, not 20, under 6. The range was wide, but the point is clear. Most men compare themselves to an unrealistic fantasy, and this gap between expectation and reality isn't harmless. It breeds anxiety, and anxiety is one of the biggest killers of sexual satisfaction. When you're in your head worrying about time, your body can't relax into the moment. Your arousal fades, your confidence crumbles, and your partner feels the distance. I've seen couples spiral into silence because of this. David, a patient in his late 60s, once admitted that he would distract himself during intimacy, trying to control the clock. The more he worried, the faster he finished. His wife felt shut out. He felt ashamed, and intimacy became something they both avoided. Only when he understood that his body was working exactly within the normal range did he begin to relax. And once he stopped chasing minutes, his enjoyment and hers returned. It's also worth remembering what the stopwatch didn't measure. The study focused only on penetration, from entry to ejaculation. It didn't count the touches, the kisses, the laughter, or the emotional closeness that surround those minutes. Yet for most women, those moments matter just as much, sometimes more, than the time spent in penetration itself. In fact, in surveys where women were asked what they preferred, the number 25 minutes often comes up. But when you look closer, you realize they aren't asking for 25 minutes of penetration alone. They're asking for a full experience, foreplay, connection, playful exploration, and yes, intercourse. When you include those elements, the clock becomes far less important. I often remind men of something simple but profound. Real satisfaction comes from connection and attention, not from the ticking of a clock. If you're worried about whether 5 minutes is enough, ask yourself instead, did I pay attention to her? Did I notice her cues? Did I make her feel desired, safe, and cherished? Because a woman who feels those things is far less concerned with a stopwatch than you might imagine. That doesn't mean challenges like premature ejaculation or difficulty climaxing aren't real. They are, and they can weigh heavily on both partners, but they are also highly treatable. Sometimes the cause is physical, like nerve sensitivity, circulation changes, or medication side effects. Sometimes it's psychological, stress, depression, or decades of conditioning around speed and secrecy. Often it's a mixture of both. The good news is that with the right guidance, improvement is not just possible, it's probable. One of my patients, Frank, came to me after nearly giving up on intimacy altogether. He had convinced himself that finishing in under 3 minutes meant he was broken. But after working with him on breathing techniques, introducing simple pelvic floor exercises, and reframing his expectations, something shifted. He came back months later smiling, saying his wife had whispered, "I feel like I have my husband back." That transformation wasn't about doubling his IELT. It was about removing the shame that had been suffocating his confidence. There's another truth I want men to hear. Women's preferences vary, and they change with age, mood, and relationship dynamics. Some nights may call for quick passion, others for slow exploration. Chasing a fixed number is like chasing the horizon. You'll never get there. What you can do is stay curious, stay present, and stay connected. When you approach intimacy this way, you stop asking, "Was that long enough?" and start noticing, "Was that meaningful for us?" Science gives us numbers, but numbers are only part of the story. They help ease anxiety, but they should never become a new set of chains. Knowing that the average is under 6 minutes should free you, not bind you. Free you from unrealistic comparisons. Free you from the myth that masculinity is measured in endurance alone. And free you to focus on what intimacy was always meant to be: connection, trust, joy, and closeness. So the next time you find yourself silently wondering if you measure up, remember George, remember David, remember Frank. Remember that you are not behind. You are not broken, and you are certainly not defined by a stopwatch. You are defined by the way you show up, with care, with attention, and with the willingness to share yourself honestly. That is what leaves a partner satisfied. That is what builds confidence, and that is what will carry you through, long after the myths have faded. So, where does this leave you, as a man trying to make sense of all these expectations and realities? It leaves you with an invitation to let go of the stopwatch, to release the pressure of living up to a number that was never rooted in truth, and to reclaim intimacy on your own terms. Because here's the beautiful part. The only right duration is the one that leaves you and your partner feeling satisfied, safe, and connected. That satisfaction may look different on different nights, in different seasons of life, and with different needs. But that's the point. It's alive, it changes, and it's meant to be flexible. I want you to remember that what science shows us isn't meant to box you in. It's meant to free you. Knowing the average is just under 6 minutes doesn't mean you should aim for 6. It means you should stop judging yourself by unrealistic ideals and start focusing on what makes intimacy meaningful for you. If you've ever worried that you weren't enough, let this data reassure you. You are not failing. You're human. And most of the time, your body is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Of course, there are times when support is needed. If you or your partner are struggling with issues like finishing too soon, struggling to finish at all, or dealing with frustration and anxiety that weighs on your relationship, don't carry that alone. Talk to a board-certified urologist who can help identify whether the cause is physical, psychological, or both. Sometimes the solution is a medical adjustment. Sometimes it's a therapeutic approach with a certified sex therapist. And sometimes it's simply about learning to reframe your expectations and let go of habits that no longer serve you. I've seen men like George who thought intimacy was behind him because his stamina was slipping. Discover that with a few simple changes, he could not only last longer, but actually enjoy the experience more deeply than ever before. I've seen couples in their 70s, like Harold and his wife, who once felt disconnected, find their way back to laughter, to touch, and to a closeness they thought was gone forever. And what made the difference wasn't chasing a longer timer, it was chasing connection. So here's the takeaway I want to leave with you. There is no magic number for how long sex should last. The only number that matters is whether both of you walk away from that experience feeling nourished, physically, emotionally, and relationally. Forget the stopwatch. Forget the comparisons. Forget the myths that told you more minutes meant more masculinity. True strength lies in presence, in listening, in being brave enough to connect without shame or fear. And if you've been carrying quiet anxiety about this, let today be the day you set it down. You don't have to measure up to anyone else's story. Your health, your intimacy, and your happiness are yours to define. And when you live from that truth, you'll find that what matters most isn't how long you lasted, but how deeply you loved, how openly you connected, and how fully you allowed yourself to be there in that moment. That, more than anything else, is the mark of a fulfilling sex life. I'm Dr. Maya Kapoor, and if this message spoke to you, I invite you to stay with this journey. Subscribe, share this with a friend who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Because this isn't just about sex. It's about confidence, connection, and living your life without unnecessary shame. Remember, your worth was never tied to a stopwatch. It was always tied to your presence, your care, and your ability to connect.